we go. It's another week. They just keep coming one after another.
How are you?
Into it.
How are you?
I don't know. How was your weekend? All right. How you worked?
I'm just having fun, kicking tires.
Shannon is downtown Toronto and working for CBC in their coverage of the Olympic Games.
Yeah, just helping my friends.
And I'm just sitting here occasionally watching.
Yeah. Did you have you watched any Olympics?
A little bit, really a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm not staying up in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
I don't like the replays.
Yeah.
If I find out the event has happened already, I'm inclined to go click, and I go to my iPhone and see who won. And so that's the dilemma you have when the games are in 12 hours, 14 hours, whatever it is away.
Yeah. I will say that we are very fortunate in our country to have coverage the way we do it with the three networks, with CBC and Sportsnet and TSN, because
then that all started in 2010.
Yes,
essentially with CTV.
You're right.
Getting the rights and then bringing TSN and Sportsnet in.
Yvonne Fitzon, and then Yvonne hiring Keith Pelly to reinvent the wheel, and it's been changed a few times, but it's still really a good thing to have access to more events on three different channels.
I'm going to ask you a question that could turn into an entire show, but let me throw something at you.
Okay.
There are now too many events in the Winter Olympic Games. This explosion of new niche sports.
Yeah. But you know why? Why though, right?
I know why, but they've gone too far, in my opinion.
Well, and it really, it's the IOC's response to the X Games. X Games in the United States have become such a factor for viewership for young people, with a lot less rules than the Olympics create. And when ABC and ESPN didn't get the Olympics 15 years ago, and they said we're going to invent our own games and the X Games, and they basically rewrote the blueprint to what winter sports were supposed to be like. That's why we are where we are, because this is the IOC's responses. We've got to be younger, we've got to be hippier, we've got to have edge, and that's what people want. And so they've come. I mean, when my first Winter Games, Bob, was 14 days. There's only 14 sports, 14 days.
Yep.
Now we're 17 days officially, but there were 3 days of events before
the opening ceremonies.
So right. It's they're trying to put 5 pounds of something into a 2-pound bag. And
it's stuff I don't know about, I don't hear about, I never see. I mean, I watched the 2-man curling and
mixed curling.
Mixed curling.
Yeah. How did we lose that? I want to know how we lost it.
Who cares? I mean, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a curling event on television on the 2 sports networks over the course of the year. Well, how many mixed curling events have you seen?
Yeah. Well,
none is the answer. To the best of my knowledge, none.
But 2-man curling teams as well.
It's contrived nonsense.
Yeah. Well,
and I'm not the least bit interested in it. If you want to have mixed, why don't you have traditional 4-man mixed team? At least that has existed here in Canada for a number of years, and any country that curls could put together a mixed team.
I'm going to nominate you to replace Thomas Bach as the president of the IOC.
Thank you.
And we can give out flying fidues and things like that.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you'll execute that policy the same way you've done in providing me with a job from time to time.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we know who's riding on whose back here is what we know.
Oh, really? Okay.
Let's take the break, and when we come back, Brian Cooper will join us. We'll talk about the Olympics, and we'll talk about a little bit about Canada and the proposed or discussed, I guess is more appropriate, potential bid from Vancouver, which would be 20 years after the 2010 games. We'll address that with Coop when we come back after these messages. McCowan and Shannon back with you. And here's a familiar face we haven't had him on the show for quite a while. Our sports business expert, so to speak, Brian Cooper. is with us from Florida, where he is. I was going to say vacationing, but yet if you're going to be on a vacation, you actually have to have a job. You have to work the other parts of the year, and you don't do any of that anymore. So,
Oh, come on.
how would you classify this?
I do a lot of this. Is for me, this is fun. It's fun.
He says as he's counting his cash. That's good. I like that.
We wish we were there with you, and I'm sure the invitation to come down is imminent.
No.
It's
Or
open,
perhaps
you
not.
know that.
I don't know where we're going to go with this conversation, but I wanted to start here. One of the things, we are in the middle of the Olympics. Our friend Shannon is boarded up at a downtown Toronto hotel working with CBC on their Olympic coverage, specifically hockey. And the rest of us are, to some degree, watching these games, as we always do. And one of the issues that has been raised over the last few weeks, more prominently at least, is the notion of Vancouver bidding for 2030. And with facilities in place, most of them, from the 2010 Olympics, a necessity, probably the biggest build will be residences. And it raises or re-raises a notion that I've had for some period of time, that, you know, we're at the point where if you're gonna spend on an Olympic Games, maybe you should have more than one. And the concept that I suggested was maybe every other year. So if you bid for, let's say, 2026, then you also get 2034. First of all, let's talk about that concept generically. You've had enough involvement with these games, and John certainly has. Is that idea feasible, viable?
You know what? I think actually, Bob, it's the only way to go forward. I think there should be Olympic City franchises. You know, that maybe there's 8 cities around the globe that have built the infrastructure that may need tweaking, you know, every 8-year turn that they get. But the notion of cities these days to build the infrastructure, whether it's highways or the ski jumps, or to you know, build the stadiums, I think the general public are saying, you know what, there are better use of dollars, that we can't afford to do it for this one great moment of PR. And that's really what it is for these cities. It is one great moment of PR. I think if you had like Vancouver or Calgary or Utah or cities, Paris and LA, around the world that have, you know, 3/4 of the infrastructure already built, then it makes sense for them and most feasible in terms of the costs associated with it. The only thing that really is the variable here is the rising cost of security. And that now has become a massive cost associated with doing these games.
But that's not relative to the site. That's relative to the games themselves. So no matter what you do, where you go, you're going to have those security costs.
But Bob, those intrinsic costs are the responsibility of the local
organizing committee.
Organizing committee. So I remember distinctly in 2002, Brian, you would remember this as well, that after 9/11, 2002, the Olympics, the security bill, and Mitt Romney was running the Olympics in,
right, this
Salt
was
Lake
in
City.
Utah. Yeah,
and the security bill went from, I believe, from 20 million to 200 million.
Well, and John, you make the, you know, we're in agreement here, violent agreement, because if you're doing this in China or Russia, where, you know,
less
they can
security
seal
issues.
off, yeah, exactly, a lot less security issues. When you're in a more democratic country that, you know, has allows more immigration, et cetera, the security issues are much more costly. But I think, you know, the days of smaller towns like Torino and around the world to say that we want to do the Olympics, the cost is, it's just out of this world. They can't do it.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because my favorite Olympics of all time, other than Calgary, of course, because I was living there at the time, was Lillehammer, Norway. And for those people who don't know Norway, Lillehammer is the size of Huntsville, Ontario, and it really is. And it was like having the Olympics in Huntsville. And there is no way anymore that a city of that size, of that ilk, could ever host an Olympic Winter Games. There's just no chance. It won't work.
And I think the politics are such these days that, whoever says we want to make this spend, the other side is going to be saying you're out of your mind, and it's going to cost votes either way.
Well, and let's remember these games, the Beijing Winter Games, in the end, there were two bids.
Yeah.
Two bids. One was Beijing, obviously. The other was Kazakhstan. And the IOC, they pleaded with China to put in a bid. Please put in a bid, because as much as we respect Kazakhstan as a country, they would say diplomatically under their breath, they did not want to go to Kazakhstan.
And then, Bobby, you've been saying this for years, that these are money losers, that, they talk about the economic impact, and they talk about the number of jobs and the legacy that's left behind, and, the apartments that are used for low income housing, et cetera. I don't know what the final numbers on those, but they can go either way. And look, as you guys know, I'm chairman of the board of Canada Basketball. We look at hosting events, and FIBA, which is the basketball version of the IOC, they're getting less and less cities putting up their hands to say, okay, we'll host this, because the exorbitant risks and costs that they make you take. So the same goes with the IOC. And John, you make a good point.
Yeah, actually, riddle me this. I do think the world has changed, but how much of a driving force of a venue is the United States? Let's face it, NBC?
Well, time zone for sure. I mean, if you look at the next two Olympics, it's going to be much better, Paris and LA, in terms of the time zone, the broadcast associated. When you're spending that type of money, and even the sponsors, they're spending $6.5 million for a 30-second spot on taped coverage.
Yeah.
Everyone loves sports live.
And let's remember, if you look at NBC's numbers, even for these games, they were, I think, if memory serves me, they were 26 million people watched the opening ceremonies in South Korea. 16 million watched Beijing. Did you realize? I can see it on your face. Do you realize the make goods that they're going to have to do?
Yeah. Especially at those prices. And so, look, I think, the sponsorship is not going to go away. I mean, you can talk about even Beijing, they talk about the human rights abuses. And then, the US and other countries, Australia, Canada, are not sending their top diplomats there or politicians. That hasn't stopped Coca-Cola or Intel or any of these corporations spending millions and millions of dollars to be associated with the games. Those political elements are washed by the side.
Well, John, working on the Olympics yourself, I assume you have access to some ratings, some numbers. The vast majority of events in these Olympics are overnight.
Yeah. I actually, just full transparency, I have not seen a number from the CBC yet.
It's too early too.
Yeah.
Well, I would say maybe they aren't publicizing that number because it's embarrassingly low.
I don't think so. I mean, because there are some numbers out that are a little different, as I understand, but it's certainly not anything that's been shared with me. I've just been focused on trying to make sure that the women wear their masks during hockey games. So
the ones with the cages on them, not the ones that protect them from COVID.
Both.
Well, look, we understand that, and I think we've understood for some time that the Olympic Games, as we grew up knowing them, will never be the same. You're never going to have 7-9 countries bidding for games. The economic reality is it is a money loser, and a colossal money loser. And with all of the things that were built, let's say for Vancouver, or are still being used in Calgary, you could have built those things for a lot less money if you felt you really needed them than building them under the pressures of the Olympic Games. And it's just the way a democratic society operates. Everything winds up going over budget. Contractors and people who are designed to build these facilities and create these events understand that there's a time frame and that they hold the hammer. If it's going to cost more, they charge more. If it's going to take longer, they charge more. So
Brian, just Brian, out of curiosity, to have your brand associated with the 5 Olympic rings, it is as a corporate partner, are the dollars bigger than ever? Have they flattened? What's going on with that?
No, the dollars are bigger than ever. And I think there's just a push amongst a lot of corporations to wrap themselves in our national flag. One of the best ways to do it is go with the national team or certainly go with the Olympic Games. The fact that it happens every 2 years, it's not a consistent 82 game schedule and you're going to get that brand exposure, but the message and the impact is deeper, I think, when you can wrap yourself in the flag. So, Jackie Ryan and the Canadian Olympic Committee and the Canadian Olympics group and David Shoemaker, they've done a tremendous job renewing new old sponsors at a much higher price and bringing in new sponsors. And you can see the sort of change of where they're going. The Lululemon deal is a real good one. Hudson Bay had been there and, a bit of a Thai brand, and they did a very, very good job. Lululemon on the edge of brand, reaching a whole different audience. They come in from major dollar. Bell renews at a major dollar, Canadian Tire renews. So they've done a really, really good job. So I don't think, I think people are still going to be spending and brands are going to be spending with the Olympic rings. They have a lot of competition out there now, though.
Yeah. Well, but ramifications of not having the NHL players there.
Oh, that impacts television, and that impacts the 30-second spots, and that impacts the national organizations, Hockey Canada, et cetera. So there is ramifications without a doubt. But I got to tell you, people fall in love with a lot of these amateur athletes that you're not watching snowboarding, you're not watching biathlon, you're not watching a lot of these sports throughout the other 2 years that they're off camera. But during this time period, the nationalism is whipped into a frenzy and you watch it. But the big players, it'd be like the NBA not participating in the summer games. That would impact it negatively, without a doubt. I think also on the infrastructure thing, Bob, and we talked about this years ago, there should be franchises. And the best Olympics I attended was Russia, believe it or not. I'm not a big fan of Russia, but the way they did it, first of all, whatever they wanted to spend, they could spend. There was no pushback from the general public saying, "Hey, Putin, you're spending too much on these games." Secondly, they had one entrance and one exit, and all of the infrastructure was built in one area. And the security was great because it was only in one area that you had to go. You didn't have to take buses and trams and whatever. So I think when you look at these franchises, choose the ones that are in autocratic countries because they don't mind spending the money.
Yeah. Well, listen, Sochi cost $50 billion more, not $50 million total, $50 billion more than any Winter Games previously.
Yeah.
To put it in perspective.
Yeah.
Well, and
I didn't know that number, but
yes.
Go ahead, Bob.
So now you raise the question of whether that spending is ultimately justified because they essentially created a resort and infrastructure for that resort. And I don't pretend to know whether, what their tourism dollars they're generating out of it or, but at least they built something where there was nothing, essentially. And maybe that's a way to go. But, Olympics are in a country, but it's a city that actually has the direct benefit. And I know now Beijing, a lot of the facilities are outside the city, Vancouver. We also had Whistler. So it's spread around a bit, but basically it's a city that hosts the Olympic Games. And again, the long-term implications of the construction that takes place and the creation that takes place could much more cheaply be done outside the Olympic environment. Maybe a place like Sochi actually could make some sense. But how many of those are there out there?
Well, not many. And as I said, in democratic countries, it's not going to happen. Autocratic countries where they spend, yes, it could happen. But even if you had 4 cities that it rotated between the 4 cities, I think that's the way to go. The long-term future of the IOC is questionable to me.
What do you mean by that? Hold on.
Just because, I know, but because I think politics and I think cost and dollars spent or dollars needed elsewhere, they ratchet up the cost, John, every year. They don't care. And the reason I say that, and you supported it. You said went down to Kazakhstan and Beijing were the ones that were bidding on it, and so like more and more people are saying, I can't afford it. The cost is not politically, it's not wise. 2, the fact that the benefit probably, as Bob would say, is an economic disaster. There's other ways, and it was the only way you get people to see your beautiful city was television. Now we'll go online. You want to do something, you want to make a big splash, do something online.
Yeah. That's a really good point. That to me, there's some logic to the way people view the world, and we are such a smaller planet now with technology, aren't we?
Yeah. By the way, John, after 15 years, that's the first time you ever said that's a really good point to me. I'm delighted.
Well, don't get used to it, Cooper.
Well, he may also have misspoke too. So, time frame is always an issue for us in North America. And yes, the U.S. networks traditionally have paid the most for broadcast rights, and therefore would prefer, we know, and sometimes are able to influence the location of games because of that. Having said that, the population of China dwarfs the population of the United States and every other country in the world. So now we have games again in China. Are we here in North America overly focused on the American audience and essentially disregarding the potential impact of the Chinese audience in games like these?
I'll tell you, the corporate sponsors aren't. I think all of them are trying to reach that market, whether doing business with the governments in the government in China, or to reach that massive audience. But I also think that when NBC goes in there and charges that much per 30-second spot, they still have to get an audience and realize, there's streaming that's going on as well, and that's starting to catch up in terms of numbers. I mean, it's still far behind, but eventually that's going to be catching up. And John, you probably see an increase in streaming on CBC's part as well.
I think CBC Gem. I think CBC Gem. Even I watched Tokyo games. I never watched the main channel. I watched on Gem, basically on demand. And NBC has put a lot of content. You would know this from those hours and hours you spend in front of the television watching the primetime show. They've spent. They have most of the content now on Peacock, which is their streaming service, and so it's an on-demand service, and it works. They work great, and they actually want it on Peacock in order to drive subscriptions, right?
Yeah, and I could tell you just from the work I do with our friends at Canada Basketball, we just did a deal through Sportsnet, and Sportsnet, had to deal with FIBA, and DAZN was in the play. The streaming company DAZN was in the play, and so those bodies are slicing and dicing. You're getting live broadcasts in prime time. You're getting, off prime time broadcasts. You're getting streaming. You're only getting these sports. You're only getting the women. You're not getting the men. They're slicing and dicing like everyone else to gain more dollars.
Right. Yeah. And look who they want. You don't see it where you are, Brian, but one of the number one sponsors on the CBC for these games is DAZN.
Is the zone?
Yeah, they are
Yeah.
all over the CBC production.
Wow.
Which is intriguing
Well,
because this is really their coming out party in Canada in terms of advertising. And I'd heard a lot of negative things about DAZN and how they may be in financial difficulty, although they're owned by a ridiculously wealthy guy,
They are.
and how they're cutting back on staffing, et cetera, et cetera. I heard a lot of negativity, and then all of a sudden, as John says, all these DAZN ads pop up.
Yeah, everywhere.
Well,
Everywhere.
you know, it's interesting because I believe TSN and Sportsnet would not take their ads because they're in direct competition. And, you know, they're all about sports. And so now they're getting an Olympic window
Yeah.
on CBC that said, you will take your money, sir.
Yeah, well, yeah, you know, it is, to me, in walking in, I noticed that right away. By the way, just as a programming note, because we can do this on our own podcast now, John Skipper's coming on in the next couple of weeks to talk about this very issue.
Is he really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. He's
Yeah.
I mean, John
He's
is
brilliant.
obviously
He's brilliant.
he's one of the most experienced guys in terms of broadcast deals.
Yeah. So John's going to come on and talk to us about this very story in the next couple of weeks.
Well, that's a good catch.
Well,
I
and
don't know why
perhaps
you haven't
we should introduce the generic audience. We all know who John Skipper is, but the generic audience may not be familiar with him. He's a former head of ESPN, and now runs.
And then went and then did go to DAZN. And left to DAZN to create his own company with a couple of other big talented guys like Dan Lebitard, and he's one of the great drivers of online content. So it's going to be an interesting conversation.
I want to circle back to Vancouver a little bit and get some thoughts on whether this is the right idea, or maybe it should be Calgary, or should Canada be hosting Olympic Games at all? We'll address all those subjects. Brian Cooper is with us.
Can we talk Super Bowl too?
Business expert. Of course we can, John.
Can we talk Super Bowl?
I don't think I could stop you if I wanted to.
That's a good point, Bob.
So unless we run out of time, and I'll do my best to see if I can make that happen. Back with more after these messages. Bob McCown, John Shannon, Brian Cooper, our sports business expert. So I started this conversation with relation to Vancouver, and we got not off on a tangent because we continue to talk about the Olympics and television and the future of the games. But there is contemplation now in Vancouver of a renewed bid for 2030. Calgary has talked about another bid.
Yeah.
I'm not
They
sure.
They rejected one. If you remember, Bob, they rejected a bid for 2026.
Yes. I don't know where they're at right now. Do you?
I think everything's on hold there because one of the big issues in Calgary, their arena plan has gone kaput. Right, Brian?
After so many years of saying we're close to getting a deal done, Calgary pulled out of it. The hockey team pulled out of the deal that they had with the city, and so I don't know where that stands. You know what? I could tell you, I was involved with a number of negotiations that anticipated a new build and a new building and greater signage and they needed that building. That barn is way past its due date.
Well, and what was it? What was it built for?
It was for the Olympics.
The 1988 Olympic Winter Games.
Let's just clarify this too, because there's a lot of politics involved in this. You can make the argument, and it's fair, that the building needs to be replaced or should be replaced. But attaching it to the Olympics is an obvious con. And I say con with no respect, with severe disrespect, because all it is a matter of shifting the cost of that from a community. The team will pay some, the community will pay some, the province will pay some. But now all of a sudden you get the feds, because of an Olympics, to kick in a significant portion of that. And that's why that is done. Let's be clear on it. Not that they don't need a new arena.
Oh no, they do need it. They do need a new arena.
I'm not disputing that.
Okay.
But that's why I wonder why the Olympic movement isn't more attached to that, the building of a new arena, and why they haven't pushed harder to try and bid for another Olympics when they could get subsidies on that arena, not to mention the other things that are going on.
Because the Olympics now, listen, Calgary in 1988, Calgary made money. Calgary turned a profit. Calgary reinvested in things.
Be careful there, John. You say that definitively. No, you can't say that.
I can. I was there. I was a bit part of it. Calgary's Olympics made money. They made about $150 million in profit, pure and utter profit. They got put back into amateur sport. They got put into city development. It made money. It really did.
I don't believe it.
Well,
I don't believe it because I've watched Olympic bids. I watched this city make Olympic bids, and I sat with guys like John Bithoff and heard the spin of how they couldn't lose money, how they were going to make money. And the truth of the matter is they could make the numbers stand up and do the Watusi, and it didn't mean it was real.
Calgary did make money, and
well, you keep saying that. I don't believe it.
It might be the last one that did.
I don't believe it. But go ahead.
You know what, Bob, that was a simpler time too.
Yes.
There was two networks that were, yeah. I mean, so I think look, I was there. Every venue I went to was completely sold out. And, you didn't have the cost that you have today. I mean, there was the infrastructure cost, but you didn't have the security cost that you had there. You didn't have the transportation cost that you have there. Calgary, I think possibly could have, and I didn't know it was 150 million, John, but I know that it wasn't the white elephant that they left behind, because all of those the venues that they built are still being used today, and I don't know what the public-private participation levels were, but that was a different time. Today, it'd be tough to rationalize, Bob, if the question is, should Vancouver or Calgary go at it right now? The political discourse that would go on from either side would almost make it impossible.
And the other thing is, if you said, well, we want to bid for an Olympics, what do you recommend? I would say never bid for the summer. Huge difference between the Winter Games and the Summer Games, from organization, from logistics. I mean, we're talking 17 or 18 sports versus 35 or 36 sports, 35 or 36 venues. And it's really, there's only one Olympic Games. That's the summer. Mm-hmm. The Winter Games are just this little thing that they try to appease countries that don't have good summer athletes.
Well, the other thing is the venues, are they going to be used after they're gone? I was in Beijing at the Nest post the Olympics. I mean, no one's there. They're not using it for anything.
Yeah, it got used. It's being used in these games now, right?
Yes.
Well, hey, but look at what they did in Atlanta. Look what they did in Atlanta. They built an Olympic stadium and then when the Olympics left, they tore half of it down. The Braves played there for 15 years, and then they've torn it down again, and the Braves have moved to the suburbs. I mean,
well, let's take something that's as close to comparable as you can get to the Olympics, and that's the World Cup of Soccer. And they're about to go to Qatar, or Qatar, if you wish. And it's been a couple of years actually since I've seen anything, but I remember when they were making their bid, they built, or were going to build, 9 new soccer stadia, all of them 50,000 capacity or more, all spectacular in their design. And then the concept was, I believe, after the games, or after the World Cup, 7 of those stadia were going to be torn down. So they're going to build 7 stadia that were going to be used for 2 weeks and then blow them up.
No sense. So, but Bob, that goes back to my point of, this doesn't work in democratic countries as easily as it does in autocratic countries.
I get it.
Yeah. Hey, can you Bob opened the conversation to soccer. What's the national team's progress and success meant for their sponsorship programs? And our buddy McCowan has talked more soccer in the last 3 months than he did in 30 years.
He loves
30 years. He loves his team.
I don't love it, but I've lived in this country all my life. My loyalty is to this country. I'm a fan of all things Canada, and what we are watching now, you'd be a fool not to be attached to it. It is something that in all my years I've never seen. Canada with a competitive team and exciting and young players and a process. I'm a fan of everything that they are doing. And I hope that I know the economic struggles that Soccer Canada has gone through, as Canada Basketball has gone through. This run, though, should be hugely beneficial to them from an economic point of view, is it not, Brian?
Without a doubt. I mean, the fact that, Bob, that, it has impacted you in a positive way is just a good example of, winning sells. Best marketing tool. You can have all the great strategies you want. Winning sells. And it enhances everything that you do. The t-shirts go out the door quicker. The broadcast deals come to you more easily. The sponsors want to renew. New sponsors are coming into the game. With more kids are playing it at the grassroots level, feeds the pipeline to better performance down the road. Winning is that virtuous cycle that really sets everything on fire. And you're seeing that with soccer in Canada. Look, they've had a lot of good years, especially with the women. They've done tremendously well. They have just never got over that hump, specifically with the World Cup. You're right. This team is exciting. They're young. The faces of that team represent the new faces of this country. And I think it draws in a lot of people, more so than ever before. So the economic impact, I think, will be felt over the next 5 years easily, in a positive way for the organization.
So I watched the game the other night from El Salvador, Canada, El Salvador, and I see signage, Scotiabank. I see a ton of Scotiabank signage. How does that work? Do they?
Scotiabank is one of the largest, I think, top 3 banks in South America. Okay. And we did that deal, actually, John.
Yeah, no, I know. That's why I'm asking.
We did the CONCACAF Cup deal, but they acquired a bunch of banks down there, and they continue to do so. And similar to the hockey program that we have, Scotiabank and hockey in Canada, we did Scotiabank and soccer in South America.
Okay, so there's no, so the plan was that you guys knew that Canada was going to be this good. So like when you sit down with your sponsor and say, listen, here's what we recommend, or do they come to you, or how does that give and take go?
We look at the participation numbers of the sport. We look at the demographics of families that are involved in soccer. We look at the broadcast rights down there, and we say, okay, it comes down to a numbers game, right? Then it comes down to brand fit. Then it comes down to negotiations and fees.
Okay,
but I'm just what John's referring to. The signage that was in the stadium there. That would have been done. That would have been done regionally or more locally, would it not, Brian? That purchase, that deal.
Correct.
It would not have been done from Toronto or from head office here in Canada.
No, it was done from Toronto head office in Canada.
It was.
Yeah.
So
their
it's
agency.
It's the fact. Well, so the fact that there are Scotiabank locations in El Salvador is consequential or inconsequential? Were they targeting a Canadian audience, or were they targeting an El Salvadorian audience?
El Salvadorian audience. Their signage came with the broadcast.
Wow. Huh.
Yeah. Well,
that signage would have been there whether Canada was playing in that game or not.
Okay. So the other one, and we talked before the break about streaming. Soccer in our country has done a huge deal with a Spanish company under the banner of One Soccer. What do you see their role in growing the game and subscriptions in our country? When you look into your crystal ball about where soccer is from a television perspective, because Sportsnet's running these games, but they're not producing them.
No, they're taking a feed.
They're taking a One Soccer feed. So right. Where do you is this just a great coincidence that our soccer team is good and we have people investing in the business, or is what comes first? Is it a chicken or egg scenario?
Well, no, I think I think they see the rise of soccer in certain countries. They look at the broadcast numbers that we get for the women's game, and so they're saying, okay, we're going to make an investment. And the same thing that just happened with Sportsnet with basketball.
Right.
You know, they realized, okay, the Raptors turned it on fire. And, you know, now all of a sudden, you know, we get so many players in the NBA, WNBA. And so let's invest for the long term. And that's what happened with One Soccer. Same. And for the streaming rights, because as you know, as we talked about before, you know, you're watching everything on Gem. I watch a ton of streaming for sports. And you're paying every time I have to get a new service, especially down here. Now I'm paying. It's crazy.
Do you think Canadian viewers in your research with the groups that you work with we're a more traditional audience? We're much more loyal to our
Linear
cable
TV?
Yes.
Yeah, I do, but I think the next generation of cord cutters, and you know, they are getting their sports when they want it, and you know, they don't want to watch live taped. They want to watch live.
Yeah.
And you know, younger audience is up for all hours, and so they're going to where they can get it streamed, I think.
Well, they also will watch on a 3-inch screen.
Yeah.
And I won't watch on anything smaller than 85.
That's right.
Well,
oh, no.
but Bobby, I got to tell you, I've watched games on my phone.
You have?
Yeah. And it's tough to see.
Trifocal?
Yeah, you got to be highly motivated, though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and I agree, it's a cord cutting thing, and I don't doubt for a second that 20 years from now, the broadcast environment is going to be dramatically different than what it is today, more different than it was 20 years ago, even.
Yeah, but you'd watch it on an iPad.
Well, again, I mean,
I wouldn't. I would as an emergency, but I wouldn't.
And I think that's the point. Like, if that was the only way I could get it, I would.
Yeah.
But there are all kinds of anecdotal stories about young people sitting in front of an 85-inch or whatever television set. It's on, the game is on there, and they're watching it on their phone.
Yeah. Well, Bob and I have had this discussion multiple times. And it's not us, but the world is changing to a two-screen system anyway, aren't they? Everybody, you're watching something and you got your laptop.
I do it myself. My kids, they're Snapchatting as they're watching. They're watching other stuff. They're getting and you know what? Even the broadcasters promote it. They're saying, go on to our website and get engaged in stats, get engaged in the promotions, get engaged in online chats.
Before we let you go, let's conclude with, unless John wants to hijack the conversation again.
I think it's
would you be a proponent
content?
Would you be a proponent of Vancouver bidding for 2030?
I love the nation building aspect of having the games. I could tell you, I never felt more proud walking around Vancouver, proud of our country, proud of the way Canadians reported themselves, proud of the fact of the performances we had. I was there for, I forget his name, he's a skier, he got first gold that we had in those games. Bilodeau, I think it was.
Bilodeau,
yeah. I was in the stands watching that. I was at the hockey games. You know what? It's great for our country, for the world to see who we are.
At what cost?
Well, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. I mean, Canadians have this great reputation to begin with. Do we need to further do that? Can we do it in other ways? Do we go online, and is there some other platform, some other event, some other happening that we can show? And why do we do these things? Is it a advertising for our country?
Does it actually promote? Does it significantly promote tourism?
100% it does. You know what? Well, significantly is the definition, and you're right. You can show the opening beauty shot of the skyline, then zoom into Whistler at the same time, and sky to sea. All of those things are great, and it does impact it. But are there other ways, less costly, less invasive on the citizenry of that community for that time frame that they're there, less security issues?
Yeah,
probably yes.
Well,
but I got to tell you, when I was there, it was the best.
We all thought it was fantastic. I mean, but if you consider the infrastructure that exists at least theoretically, there would be no participation facilities that would have to be built. There
Agreed.
would not have to be a highway built to Whistler. The really the only major construction element would be residences, and the residences can be and are invariably converted into apartment or condo units after the fact, so that there is a recovery process, whether it's 100% economic recovery or not, but there's a recovery process for that. So at least in theory, from a construction standpoint, you can eliminate probably 90% of the cost of 2010. And then now you have operational costs. And as John said, yeah, security is going to be really costly. How many police officers, John, did you and I meet from? We met cops from every town and village from coast to coast.
Yeah.
In this country, and they stopped us every time we were walking to work to say
I
hello.
remember seeing the two of you.
Well, we were like rock stars out
but,
there.
no, but the problem was that we were in handcuffs, and
Let me tell you this.
You may have been in handcuffs after I left you, but I don't want to get into that.
Do not even talk about that.
I would if I'm Vancouver and theoretically, I'd say, yeah, I'll do this.
Me too.
But I'll do it under the terms that 8 years from now, I get it again.
Yeah.
And 8 years from then, I get it again. You give me 3 shots at this, 8 years apart, I'm good.
And the interesting thing about the Vancouver consideration is where the idea of the bid is coming from. It's not really from the city of Vancouver. It's from the native bands. It's from the Indigenous.
Yeah.
And they have become, tremendously smart business people.
Yes.
Well, they're the power brokers in this.
They're the power brokers. And so if there's a real push for the Lower Mainland, for Vancouver and the Indian reservations, I'm sorry for the 1960 reference. But if the Indigenous leaders want to do it, I think we have a better chance of it happening than if it was just the regular politicians at City Hall in Vancouver.
Agree.
Well, John, and you have more familiarity than either Brian or I because you're from southern BC. There is a significant Indigenous influence in Vancouver, is there not?
Not only
All of BC.
All of BC. And
Yeah.
I would say what has changed there more than anything, Bob, in the last couple of decades, it's there more influence and respect.
Mm-hmm.
I think that has changed tremendously in British Columbia, and acknowledgement of where things and who really founded the land and who really lived in the land. I think that's really changed in British Columbia in the last 2 decades.
All positive stuff.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. I guess we're not going to talk Super Bowl, so we can talk Super Bowl some other day. So.
Well, I got a tea time.
Okay. Well, then we're definitely not talking Super Bowl.
Well, and with the number of shots I anticipate you'll be hitting, you better get out there in a hurry. Otherwise, you won't be able to finish.
Well, hold on,
dark.
Bob. But if Brian's going to say that, you know what his nickname is yesterday, right? It's yesterday. His nickname is yesterday. Yeah, his nickname is yesterday because, hey, yesterday when I played, I was really good.
Yeah, we know that.
Yeah. There, everybody. Brian, yesterday, Cooper.
Have fun out there. We're jealous, and I haven't seen you in a while. We hope to see you face to face very soon. Stay safe, okay?
Good enough. Good to see you guys. Take
Brian
care.
Cooper, our sports business expert. We'll be back after these messages. Our thanks to Brian Cooper for joining us. McCowan and Shannon back with you. A couple of things before we go.
Trivia question for you.
Yes, sir.
Who's in the Super Bowl?
That'd be LA Rams and Cincinnati Bengals.
Okay, good. Because I had to think about it for a second about 10 minutes ago.
Well, I was thinking more about, is this a trick question?
No. I mean,
well, I get your point.
So you're 2 weeks between the game. 2 weeks.
Pal, I've been on that bandwagon for 30 years.
Yeah.
Like they did, there as at least a couple of times.
Yeah.
They went back to 1 week.
Yes, they did. Long time ago now, though.
Yeah. And I went, oh, giddy up, yippee.
Yeah.
Because it seemed to me that the only reason to not have the championship game the week after the conference championships was to squeeze the Pro Bowl in, which they viewed, I guess, as a cash cow. Well, there's nothing less watchable than a Pro Bowl.
Oh, you mean you weren't glued on Sunday to the football game? The 42-35 AFC victory over the NFC?
The fact that you know the score is shocking. The fact that you even know it was on Sunday is rather surprising.
Well, it was in your favorite town.
Everything was in my favorite town that week. Last weekend.
And I know you love the NHL All-Star game so much too. Did you watch it?
Oh my God, I wouldn't waste 1/2 of 1 second watching that crap.
Yeah. Well, it's not for you though, so don't worry about it.
Well, I don't care who it's for, but
you do it. You should. That's good marketing. That's for 12-year-olds.
It's a waste of time. Waste of time.
No, it's for young people.
No, it's not. It's for corporate sponsors. And so Gary has a throne to climb up.
Is it everything
proclaim.
Based on what we talked with Brian? Isn't everything for corporate sponsors these days?
Well, I guess.
Yeah.
But well, the NHL All-Star game, there's no point talking about that. It's done and gone, and I assume we'll be back next year, but I hope not.
So about the Pro Bowl, it was
forget the Pro Bowl, the Super Bowl.
Oh yeah.
All momentum is lost.
Yes. I totally
you had
agree.
2 consecutive weekends of stunningly entertaining and exciting games.
Yeah.
Now, not all was the best football you ever saw.
No.
But they were all close. We have never, in the 50 whatever years of Super Bowls in the history of the National Football League, ever had that many entertaining playoff games leading to a Super Bowl.
Bob, I agree with you completely.
And the momentum, poof.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't feed off it.
No, it's crazy. It really is. It's just a shame. I mean, it feels like forever ago of the Kansas City Buffalo game. It feels like forever.
Well, we'll see. I mean, it is a Super Bowl after all. You have a hometown team.
Yep.
And I assume there will be a few Cincinnati fans there, but probably not nearly as many as there were San Francisco fans last weekend. In any event, we'll keep our eye on it over the course of the week. Mm-hmm. That'll do it. Time is our enemy. For John Shannon, Bob McCowan. See you tomorrow. Goodbye, everybody.